Jack King Kirby. A magnificent force in the world of comics, the creator of several characters and concepts still in regular circulation to this day. However, most of the time when you hear people talk about Kirby, it is entirely regarding his artwork. His dialogue receives less effusive praise. And you know what? I get it. Many of his characters speak like no human, in grand declaratory statements, with bombast and grandeur. Adjectives like Shakespearean and operatic abound when describing his characters, and they speak accordingly. Sometimes they speak in overly elaborate exposition, in a manner even more stilted than Chris Claremont. Mark Evanier, a former assistant to Kirby and writer of the biography Kirby, King of Comics, says, Jack Kirby filled in the balloons on most of what he did for the remainder of his career, often in a florid, theatrical voice that did to linguistics what his art had always done to the rules of anatomy and physics. While I understand why that might put some people off, I personally love it. Kirby knew he was dealing with mythic archetypes, and the dialogue is designed to evoke that sense in readers. His gods talk like gods. With all that in mind, I'd like to discuss this by having a close look at issue number 3 of The Forever People, titled Life vs. Anti-Life. The Forever People was one of 3 titles that comprised Jack Kirby's Fourth World, his grand cosmic saga based on the shattered peace between the dueling planets of New Genesis and Apocalypse. As the names would suggest, New Genesis is a peaceful paradise ruled by the benevolent Highfather, while Apocalypse is a nightmare world of industry and suffering under the tyrannical hand of Darkseid. One of DC's arch-villains, Darkseid is the embodiment of fascism who searches for the anti-life equation, a mathematical proof that can eradicate all free will. The subjects of this video, the Forever People, are the adolescent youth of New Genesis. They comprise the youthful firebrand Seraphim, calculating Viking the Black, the hulking Big Bear, the ethereal beautiful Dreamer, and the generic Mark Moonrider. By saying the word of power Taru, they summon and trade places in limbo with the Infinity Man, a being of incredible power that does the majority of the fighting for these kids. This issue deals with glorious Godfrey, a preacher of anti-life, who wins over followers with a grand organ which empowers his words with a hypnotising effect. Winning over his bleary-eyed converts, he outfits them into the Justifiers, jackbooted thugs for the army of Darkseid. The Forever People investigate after a young friend is confronted by a Justifier, and in the process come face to face with Darkseid himself. They are captured and left in the tender mercies of Darkseid, Darkseid's master torturer, where the issue ends. Even though they're the protagonists, there's very little of the Forever People in this issue. The main thrust of this story is Kirby's take on the power of demagoguery, of those forked tongues that could incite the worst in man. The main focus is glorious Godfrey, whose modus operandi is the power of speech. He wins over crowds of apostles by telling them what they want to hear. He tells them that the faceless other is the cause of their problems, and that only by embracing anti-life can those problems be overcome. Through anti-life, all is justified. If you have no will other than the group's, you don't need to make choices. He espouses opposites. Anti-life is the positive belief. By surrendering your free will to the crowd, you gain the right to punish the outgroup, the people who threaten your way of life through wrongthink. As he puts it, anti-life is the cosmic hunting license, the right to point the finger or the gun. Godfrey is an amusing figure, if only as the focus of Kirby's bile. He spares no words in describing how pathetic he is. Darkseid calls him a shallow, precious child, happy with the sweeping sound of words. The Infinity Man describes his power as little more than wind, the hot air he expels his only skill. Godfrey is closely modelled on the famed preacher Billy Graham, whose fiery speeches and evangelising concerned Kirby greatly. As Mark Evanier described it on his blog, Kirby was appalled at some of Graham's apocalyptic sermons which, to Jack, were more calculated to instill fear than faith, and to stampede people into service of Graham's causes. This matches Godfrey's speech at the start of the issue to a T. He warns of the coming of Darkseid, of the approaching Holocaust, and that by giving in to anti-life, you will be on the winning side. He even has Godfrey set up operations in a massive circus tent, not unlike the grand revelations where people like Graham would proselytise at the time. It's not for nothing that Kirby introduces the issue with a quotation from the Austrian house painter himself, Adolf Hitler. Such an explicit comparison between the crowds at the Nazi rallies and the crowds at Graham's sermons certainly puts one to pause. This is followed by seeing the Justifiers in action. They kidnap an unspecified group of people, forcefully and seething with hatred, and begin a reign of terror on the street. A library is set ablaze, businesses are smashed, defaced with graffiti, the letter S for scapegoat. A systematic targeting of an out-group, blamed for every problem that plagues society. I'm sure Kirby had the Kristallnacht in mind while writing this, the nights of violence against the Jewish population of Nazi Germany in November 1938. The targeted violence and graffiti echo the defacement of Jewish businesses from that harrowing event. One particularly disturbing thing is how we're never given specific details on the others that the Justifiers are persecuting. Kirby is very canny to leave the details vague. We get no distinguishing features on the victims, nor are we told why they were targeted. This leaves it simple enough to assume that these are people who have not yet heard the call of anti-life. However, one of the Justifiers does say they've been waiting to do this for years, implying that this resentment goes back further than Godfrey's exhortations. Anti-life has given them the right to point the finger, to openly act and express their hatreds, something that polite society previously prohibited. Again, Kirby provides a fantastical explanation for this sudden bout of victimization, as the proponents of anti-life were whipped into this frenzy by Godfrey's hypnotizing machine, which enhanced the convincing power of his words. But would this have been as effective if there wasn't hate in their hearts already, waiting to be stirred? The first page, with its array of blank gazes, has the crowd cheering, wanting to hear more of Godfrey telling them what they want to hear. Anti-life is the easy answer, the one that lets you blame others for your problems and justifies the destruction of those scapegoats. The Justifiers burn down a library, seeking to destroy decadent ideas. While a clear allusion to the many Nazi book burnings from the 1930s, I expect Kirby may also have had the image of the comic book burnings of the 40s in mind. Inspired by Dr. Frederick Wertham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, the medium of the comic book was seen as a corrupting influence on the youth of America, and moral crusaders arranged several burnings across the country to prevent the corruption of any more young minds from the correct way to be. Another similarity is found in the 1954 Ray Bradbury novel, Fahrenheit 451, a dystopian tale of the firemen, flamethrower-wielding censors tasked with the incineration of books to keep a drugged populace docile and happy with media designed to placate rather than challenge. The Justifiers match all of these tactics mentioned, evoking the eradication of ideas so only a single ruling thought can remain, in this case the creed of anti-life. Grant Morrison's use of the Justifiers in the Final Crisis event has a nice explanation for this action. What disagrees with Darkseid is heresy. What agrees with Darkseid is superfluous. Anti-life, the complete surrendering of one's will, a cult of personality emanating from the supreme will of one being, that of Darkseid. We see this in possibly the most famous page from this issue, where Godfrey expresses disbelief that the anti-life equation actually exists, and Darkseid puts him in his place, speaking the infamous line, "I am the revelation, the tiger force at the core of all things. When you cry out in your dreams, it is Darkseid that you see." My read on this takes a bit of a tangent, based on how Darkseid is using the term revelation. The planet of Apocalypse, from which Darkseid and his cronies come from, is a hellish world of fire and suffering, which is apt for the popular understanding of the name. Usually, when one hears the word apocalypse, the image in mind is of a great catastrophe, destruction, or a blue-lipped X-Men villain. However, the term comes to us from the ancient Greek, where it more accurately translates to revelation. The word entered English usage from the Bible, from the Book of Revelation, also known as the Apocalypse of John. Given that the book contains all kinds of explosions, lakes of fire, and the four horsemen, the association of apocalypse with destruction makes a lot of sense. This carries on to the backdrop of the fourth world, New Genesis and Apocalypse, named for the first and last books of the Christian Bible. One world of birth, life and flourishing, the other death, destruction and pain. So why does Darkseid's statement, "I am the revelation," matter in this context? We could read this as him saying, "I am Apocalypse," in an homage to Louis XIV's apocryphal L'État, c'est moi, or I am the state. He is reminding Godfrey that every action he does is the extension of Darkseid's will, of Darkseid himself. For Godfrey, The doctrine of anti-life is a useful tool, something he can preach and induce into the masses to control them. For Darkseid, anti-life is his goal, his life, and the cause of his every action. They both seek to control the masses, but Darkseid's manipulation is authoritative, rather than seductive. Darkseid is Apocalypse. He is the creed that Godfrey is trying to spread. And so this revelationist, barely believing in the doctrine he preaches, is a tool of Darkseid's, and should always remember that. The art of this page sells it. Godfrey looks pathetic and pleading, while Darkseid's imposing figure takes up the majority of the page, barely glancing over his shoulder at the cringing figure behind him. If we wanted an image to express how Kirby viewed Billy Graham and his ilk, this would be it. This issue bears a great similarity to a previous work of Kirby's, Fantastic Four issue 21. This features the appearance of the Hate-Monger, a figure very similar to Glorious Godfrey in how he whips up the mob into a frenzy of hatred using a special hate ray. He also happens to be Adolf Hitler, or a reasonable facsimile, just to drive the point home in case his Ku Klux Klan garb wasn't evidence enough. Forever People issue 3 plays to Kirby's talents as a storyteller and writer. On the face of it, this is a simple tale of an evil god tricking the populace with a magic machine that amplifies easy answers offered by a charismatic pitchman. Beneath the surface, it highlights the dangers of groups impelled to act against others, giving into irrationality and fear. By reflecting real-world events through the veneer of the superhero comic, Kirby could express his anxieties over several public figures, and hopefully impel his readers into recognising this evil both on the page and outside it. Kirby is quoted by Mark Evanier as saying that, if you don't fill in the balloons, they don't give you any credit for the writing. While he might not have filled in the balloons as eloquently as some might have liked, the way he directs the characters and their motivations show this story is a fine expression of his writing talents. Well, I rather enjoyed delving into this issue. It inspired me to give a closer look at some more Kirby stuff. Perhaps the issue of Mr. Miracle with Funky Flashman, that could be quite fun to read. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that, or other Jack Kirby or Fourth World stuff covered. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.